Hello everybody and welcome to this new video. Today we are going to cover a very important grammar lesson, one that often confuses a lot of students and English learners, and maybe you are one of them, which is why you probably clicked on the video. The topic that we are going to cover is very simply quantifiers in English. So we are going to try and understand deeply this topic or this lesson by trying to answer three main questions. The first question that we are going to answer is, what are quantifiers after all? What is this category of words that we are dealing with? What is the purpose? What is the objective of using quantifiers? The second question that we will try to answer is, what are the quantifiers that we have in English, and are they or do they belong to one category, or are there different types of quantifiers in English? And the final and last question that we are going to try and answer is, how do we use quantifiers in real life situations, in like grammatically correct sentences? And we will finish this lesson by a very short exercise that you can do to see if you understood the lesson very well. So without further ado, let's go and dive directly into the lesson. For the first question that we have today, what are quantifiers? We will try and answer this question through pictures. So the first picture that I'm going to show you is this one. If I ask you to count the dogs that we have on the screen, you can tell me we have 3 dogs on the screen. Great. Everything is clear so far. What about now? What if I ask you now to count the dogs? First, this picture looks very confusing, so counting the dogs will be a very, very hard task, and it will also like take a lot of time. So you can just sum it up by saying, well, there are a lot of dogs on the screen. There are a lot of dogs on the screen. So the word or the expression that we used a lot of does not define a very like specific number, but rather it just gives me an idea about the number of dogs. There are a lot. Maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30, but in general, there are a lot of dogs on the screen. Let's go to the next picture. In the next picture, again, we have 3 apples, but if I move to the next slide, you can see that there are more than 1 apple. So here, again, if I ask you to count these apples, you can tell me, well, there are a lot of apples, there are plenty of apples, there are many apples, there are numerous apples. Again, we are not describing the exact number of apples that we have on the screen, but rather we are describing their quantity, right? Let's move to the next question. And the next question is actually quite weird, because count the water. Normally, we don't count the water. We don't say 1 water, 2 waters, 3 waters. We will see later what we call these kind of words. But normally, we can say how much water is there. I just used count the water to keep up with the previous picture. So here, if I ask you how much water do you see on the picture, you can tell me, well, I see a little bit of water, I don't see a lot of water, I don't see much water, etc. Or I see some water. So all of these words that we are using here describe the quantity of water that we have on the picture. Same thing here. You can tell me we have a lot of water, we have plenty of water, we have too much water. So again, we are describing the quantity. So I think you can get from the images that we have just seen that when we talk about quantifiers, we are talking about words that we use before nouns. So when I say a lot of apples, so apples is a noun, and a lot of is the quantifier that tells me how much apple or how many apples there are, right? So if I say, so they are words that we use before nouns to try or to say or to describe how many or how much of something we have. For how many, we use it with things that we can count. We can say how many dogs, how many apples. We can't say how many waters, all right? But for things that we cannot count, we can say how much. How much coffee do you drink? How much money do you have? Etc. etc. So I think from these examples that I have just given you, you can understand that in English, we have 2 types of words. Words that we can count, and this will come very handy later on. We have words that we can count, and we have words that we cannot count. So I have a list of examples here. You can pause the video and try to see if you can recognize the words that we can count and the words that we cannot count. So for the words that we can count, let's go through them one by one. For sugar, mostly it's a quantity. So we don't say I have 1 sugar, 2 sugars, 3 sugars. We can say I have 1 sugar cube. Those cubes or spoon, so we can count that. But for sugar itself, the word sugar is something that we cannot count. Chairs, we can count them. Water, as we said before, we can count that. We can't count that. Books, I have read 2 books. I have read 3 books. We can count that for sure. Dogs as well. Advice. This is a very common mistake in English. A lot of people will tell you, I have heard an advice or 2 advices, but that's wrong in English. Normally, we can say a piece of advice, 2 pieces of advice, some advice. It's an uncountable nouns, actually. Apples, of course, countable. Rice, we can count rice grains, or we can count kilos. For example, I have 1 kilogram of rice or 1 pound of rice, but we can't count the rice itself. We can say I have 2 rices. Furniture, we can't count it, believe it or not. And finally, cars, that's something that we can count. So basically, this is the solution for this exercise. Why do we need this? Why do we need to know if we can count a word or can't count? Very simply because in English, we have 3 types of quantifiers. Ones that we can only use with words that we can count, one that we can only use with words that we cannot count, meaning uncountable nouns, and finally, quantifiers that we can use with both of them. So let's go and see some quantifiers that we can use with countable nouns. We will see that through some examples. So let's read the examples together. You can pause the video, try to identify the quantifiers that we have in the sentences, and then play the video because I'm going to go directly into it. I have some books on the shelf. There are many dogs in the park. She bought a few apples from the market. He needs several chairs for the meeting, and there are too many cars on the road. So here, maybe you recognize that the quantifiers are respectively some chairs, some cats, some dogs, many, a few, several, too many. One of them, some, we can use it also with uncountable. So we can say some water, etc. But we cannot say, I have many water. I have a few water. I have several water. I have too many water, right? So that's wrong in English. We use these quantifiers with only words that we can count. Let's move on to the next type of quantifiers. The next type is very simply quantifiers that we use with uncountable nouns, nouns that we cannot count. So the first, or again, we will go through examples. So again, you can pause the video, try to identify the quantifiers because I'm going to go directly to the answer. Would you like some sugar in your coffee? We need little water to cook the pasta. He provided a lot of advice on how to solve the problem. There is too much rice in the pot. She doesn't have enough furniture for her new apartment. So again, the quantifiers that we have here are some, we already seen it before, a little, a lot of, too much, and enough. All right, enough mostly is used with negative. So we say there isn't enough water, for example, or we don't have enough something. All right, great. So these are the 2 first types of quantifiers, one that we use with countable nouns, one that we use with uncountable nouns. The third type and the last type is quantifiers that we can use with both. I think you already seen some examples, some being one. So we can say some cats and also some coffee or some water. So here we have quantifiers that we can use with both. You can have, for example, some, which is used with some coffee and some apples. Enough, we use it with money and people. And a lot of, which we can use with, again, luck, which is uncountable, and also cars, which is countable. So finally, this is a little table that summarizes everything. I will make it like fit the entire screen. So if you want to take a screenshot, you can go ahead and do that, because I'm going to be back in 3, 2, and 1, and I will be back. So again, you can go back and pause the video and take as many screenshots as you want. So these are some quantifiers that we use with countable, uncountable, or both. Some of these quantifiers, we have already seen them in the examples that we discussed before. Some others, I just added them here. So a few, for example, use it with countable. There are a few students in the classroom. I have a few books on my shelf. There is a number of problems that people find. There are numerous apples in my fridge, etc., etc. For uncountable, we have a little. I have drunk a little coffee this morning. A bit of. Can you give me a bit of sugar, for example? A great deal of. water or oceans have a great deal of water. And finally, those that we can use with both. So I'm going to go directly to the practice. This is a little exercise that I have prepared for you to see if you have understood the lesson well. So I'm going again to ask you to pause the video. I have provided some suggestions on the right of the screen, but you can use other quantifiers that you have learned today. So I'm going to go to the first one to give to you as an example how people are coming. People is a countable noun. It's accountable. We can count it. One person, two people, three people, etc., etc. So we can't use, for example, much. We can't say how much people. So we need to say how many people are coming. Many and much, we use them with questions. Many, we use it with questions about countable nouns. Much, we use it with questions about uncountable nouns. The next one, we've got chicken. We can say some chicken. How? So this is how, again, it's a question about an uncountable noun. So here we should say, how much water do you think we have or we need? There are a lot of cats in the garden. I've bought some new shoes. Do you have some advice? We can say, do you have many advices, right? We can say that. So because advice, as we have seen before, is an uncountable noun. We have a lot of chairs, or we have a few chairs, or we have plenty of chairs. There isn't much toothpaste because toothpaste is an uncountable noun. You can say one toothpaste, two toothpaste, etc. So we say enough or much because we're talking about the substance that we brush our teeth with. So I think that's it for quantifiers for today. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you have understood this lesson very well, let me know in the chat, and please don't leave until you click the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing that. And I have a little challenge for you actually at the end of this video, which is to go down and write for me 2 sentences in the chat, one with a quantifier with countable noun and one with a quantifier with an uncountable noun. Write for me your sentences in the comments. If there are any mistakes, I will make sure to review them. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.